From Leanne Watson, General Manager from the Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, giving us an update on your work and your role, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Can I firstly just say thank you for the opportunity, and secondly pass on apologies from our Chief Executive Peter Townsend, who's currently in Auckland with the Sarah Roadshow, so hence the reason we've got the B team here today.
No, you're not the B team at all.
Actually, he did tell me to say the A team.
We might call you the A+ team.
Absolutely, thank you.
Just don't tell Peter.
Actually, he did tell me to say the Aussie A team. Anyway, look, I just wanted to start off by giving you a little bit of a brief overview of who we are, and I appreciate that many of you will already know this. But just as a wee bit of an update, I suppose. So we have 2,800 members, and we're a not-for-profit organisation who are owned by our members. We're the principal business support agency in the South Island, and three overarching strategic goals that we have are around building business capability, ensuring our members can operate in a business-friendly environment, and recognising and rewarding success in Canterbury to make a positive case for sustainable, profitable business in our community. So when I was asked to present today, it was a little bit around the Chamber's role, I guess, post-earthquake and what we're currently doing now. But I think it's really important to understand the scale of what we're heading into. And what we find is that many businesses and agencies simply don't understand the scale. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about some of that scale. So we've all heard about the 40 billion, and that's 40 billion before we add on any betterment, which most repairs being undertaken include. So it's significantly bigger than the 40 billion. That equates to around 3 years of Fonterra's total export revenue, landing on our population of 500,000. 3 years. 3 years of Fonterra's export earnings. Yep. So it's a pretty significant figure. There are 145,000 houses with damages under 100,000, and the 3 billion contract with Fletcher's EQC is just over half completed. There are approximately 25,000 homes with over $100,000 worth of damage, of which only 2,630 have been or are under repair. Approximately 8,000 homes have been destroyed or are written off, and we've only just started the commercial rebuild. So we're about 10% into the total rebuild, but more importantly with 90% to go. Many of you will have heard Peter Townsend talk about the urban myths, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about those because important that this, these are the sorts of myths that the rest of the country have around our city. So the first one is that we're well advanced in our recovery phase, and recovery, yes, but rebuild we've only just started with 90% to go. The second is that we've lost a lot of people from our city. We've all heard stories of tens of thousands of people vacating the city since the earthquakes, which is simply not true. The reality is that we have had significant shifts within Christchurch, from people moving from one part of Christchurch to another. But the overall population of Greater Christchurch has increased markedly since the last census by about 13,000 people, and in fact greater than it was prior to the 4th of September 2010. The third urban legend is around the issue of capital flight. The spectrum of large amounts of money flying out of Christchurch is a myth that simply has to be dispelled. It is not where the money flies, but where it lands, and that's what we need to ensure. We need to create an environment here in Christchurch that will encourage capital to land. There is plenty of capital sloshing around Christchurch, looking for a place to land, and it's up to us to ensure that it does indeed find a home here in our city. And the fourth is that we've suffered significant economic downturn, which we haven't. The current growth in our region is around 7% of GDP, and that is unprecedented. And we've really got to take that into account, that the reconstruction of the city has only just started. It's hard to imagine how big the growth in this economy will be over the next 12 months. Business survival in the post-earthquake environment has been extraordinary. The normal churn rate for businesses in our community, so that's businesses that go out of business for one reason or another, was around 11.4% before the earthquakes. Post-earthquakes is sitting at around 11.6%. We've had 17,000 new businesses or new business registrations, with 11,000 of those being new companies since 4th of September 2010. Unemployment is 2% below the national average. Consumer spending has grown as fast as anywhere in New Zealand. Business confidence and business intentions are high, and we've had a 24% increase in our exports through the Port of Lyttelton. Those are statistics that clearly illustrate a strong economy and one that is well poised to take advantage of our positive economic challenges ahead. One of the critical issues in coping with the scale of the rebuild is forming collaborative models where companies inside Christchurch can unlock economic opportunities with companies outside of the region. That is a model that has long legs and is starting to be seen more and more in the context of the rebuild around Christchurch. So how the business community met the challenges, I think this is really important too, to understand just the resiliency of the business community that I've just mentioned. If you look at disasters elsewhere in the world, it's not uncommon to have a 30% depression in business activity. In Christchurch, that simply didn't happen, and there are 4 fundamental reasons, in our opinion, as to why and which we can learn from. The first being the government's earthquake support subsidy. On the 6th of September, Peter Townsend was interviewed on Morning Report stating that if we didn't do something to support our business community, there would be significant business collapse within weeks. With most businesses, particularly small, relying on cash flow to pay their staff, if the business wasn't able to operate, they simply couldn't pay their staff, and there would be no business. Bill English, who was listening, rang Peter and said, "What do you want us to do?" Our response was treat Christchurch as a place where there is business as usual, but with no business. The result was the earthquake subsidy support subsidy, which post-September resulted in 2,300 businesses and 11,700 employees receiving $10.2 million. And it was done on a very high trust basis and implemented very quickly. And that was a crucial component of the scheme. Following 22nd of February, Bill English rang us and told us he'd be upping the employment earthquake support subsidy from $350 a week to $500 per week for employees, and it would apply to all companies, not just small companies. This resulted in $200 million being put in to support approximately 15,000 companies and their employees. And we still receive feedback today. In fact, had one yesterday on a survey that we completed saying that if it wasn't for that scheme, many businesses would just not have survived. The second reason for the business survival being so high was the behaviour of many of our support institutions, and particularly places like Inland Revenue and the banks. Inland Revenue were instrumental in delaying tax payments. The banks were very open and honest and having conversations with businesses around cash flow and increasing $5,000 lots to help working capital and delay payment of loans. The third reason was the formation of Recover Canterbury, a joint venture between the Canterbury Development Corporation and the Chamber to support all businesses who were impacted by the earthquake. This included taking the mandate for business support post 4th of September. Sorry, I'll just have a quick drink. It also included co-locating the CDC with the Chamber for a few weeks, given their building was in the red zone post-September. And we set up a business support call centre, a dedicated website, and we're in the process, in fact, on the 22nd of February, the morning of the 22nd of February, our first 2 business recovery coordinators started with the CDC and with ourselves. Post-September, obviously that Recover Canterbury model was put on steroids, and we began that whole process again. At its peak, which included seconding staff from local government agencies such as Inland Revenue, MSD, etc., we had 30 business recovery coordinators. We also set up a trust fund with seed funding of $200,000 from the government, and at its peak reached $6.2 million after seeking corporate support. Funding support from that fund was provided to over 380 businesses, and general support provided to over 7,000 businesses through the call centre, and direct one-on-one assistance provided to over 1,400 businesses between February 2011 and May 2013. There's also many other levels of support that were offered through that organisation, which I won't go into detail. And the fourth one was just the sheer determination of the business community to refuse to lie down, and I think we've seen that again and again and again, including probably through yesterday's extreme weather situations. Small businesses will do almost anything to save their businesses, including risking their lives to get back into their buildings. And we learned that the relationship between limited liability companies and their owners is much more than just a company. So where we are now, and what are the issues that we're facing now? The first issue is around insurance. And while we're making progress, this has taken a lot longer than what we would have expected for reasons that have been well versed. 45% of house insurance has been settled and 70% of claims have been settled. Which bit? That 45% of house insurance have been settled and 70% of commercial claims are settled. The second is around building consents. With insurance payments now coming through, there will be added pressure from the residential sectors to have their homes rebuilt. and repairs which are starting to see huge pressure on consenting processes. Given we're only 10% into the rebuild, this can only increase. Resourcing constraints are both around materials and supply, including increasing building costs and people. 7,500 new migrants on temporary work visas arrived in Christchurch up until June last year. 7,500. And we're expected to see another 10,000 migrants. The forecast is around 10,000 by June 2014 this year. No, they're all temporary work visas, yes. Some of that 10,000 will include some renewals of those 7,000, but we're still talking about a significant number. June this year. Yep, this year. So this puts significant pressures on our economy, all parts, including housing and accommodation, and it changes the dynamics of our city. The logical cascading sequence of constraints will put serious pressures on our resources in the context of a regional economy that is already growing at 7%. So what is the Chamber doing to support business? In the context of this new environment, the Chamber have changed their business model and the way in which they support their members. Up until 6 months ago, our services were made available to all businesses, not just our members. We are now starting to get back into providing a higher level of support to our members, given we're a membership-based organisation and that's our primary means of funding. We've doubled our resource in 2 key areas as a result of the increased needs of business. The first is in our health and safety advisory and consultancy offering, and the second is a government contract we have with MB, which is around running settlement support services for both new migrants and employers. The large number of new migrants and employers who haven't previously employed migrants means that this area continues to grow and the support mechanisms become more complex and more far-reaching. At a glance, this is what we cover. We have a team of 30 staff, and we also, as I mentioned, run a couple of government contracts. The second one is a regional partner around building business capability and access to government grants for particularly around research and development. One of the key points of difference we have is a wide range of areas we can assist, and we support all sectors and sizes of businesses and the depth of service that we can offer. We deliver support in a wide range of ways, including everything from resources to training, events, advice and consultancy, right through to member savings. So just a couple of last slides. We strongly advocate the independency between a healthy business community and a healthy community. Many organisations or many individuals think because we're a business-based organisation that's our main focus, but anyone who knows what we do and knows the work particularly that Peter Townsend and many of his management team are involved in recognise that there is a very strong dependency between a healthy community and a healthy business environment, and that's a really strong role that we advocate for. We play a vital role as a non-political organisation, ensuring business interests are well represented and promoted across Canterbury. So how can the City Council help? Some key messages that we have for you: minimising the financial impositions on business, be supportive of business and, where possible, overtly business friendly through case management and making things easy. Provide certainty for business. We've all heard a lot around creating a certainty of framework around some of the rebuild projects and making sure that there is enough information back to the business community about what's happening. Work on a big integrated plan for our city. There's so many different plans across the city. If we can have one integrated plan bringing them all together, that would be really helpful. Help us determine what Christchurch should aspire to be. And also recognise that the Chamber, we are a trusted partner to work on agreed common objectives in the interests of optimising Christchurch's future. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. I'll take the liberty of the first question. And it really was that comment about working on a big integrated plan for our city, because I think I understand, we've got the central city plan, we've got various other plans around the place, transport, different chapters, we're doing our district plan review. Tell me what that would look like as far as the Chamber's concerned.
Well, I think the main focus of an integrated plan is to create some certainty around all of these things. So for businesses that are impacted by many different facets of those plans, to have to understand the complexities of each of those plans is really difficult. So having an overarching plan that takes into account all of the different components of those plans at quite a strategic level, I think would be really, really helpful to create some certainty, but also to create a centralised platform for businesses to go to say, right, how does this all fit together?
So, I mean, I suppose some of your businesses would have more than one location in the city, sometimes in the CBD, sometimes in the suburbs. So that would be helpful as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess transport would tie into that.
Transport's a key one, I think, because often it is done in isolation, or it appears that it's done in isolation. So that would be a key one to be part of that integrated model.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Ali, Glenn, Phil.
Thank you. Hi, Leanne. Look, I have to say the leadership that the Chamber showed for business, particularly, I think, in the days and months that followed February 22nd was absolutely stunning. I think that it made a huge difference in actually keeping things going and giving people some surety of income and businesses surety of income as well. I'm concerned, though, obviously, about the insurance settlement figures. You mentioned 45% of residential. You're aware that the majority of those are red zone cash settlements, that there's still a huge number outstanding as far as repairs and rebuilds go. This has a huge effect, flow-on effect into the economy, to say nothing of emotional well-being and psychosocial well-being as well. How do you think that this can be improved? What do you think? Do you have any ideas on how that can be improved?
It's a tricky question, Ali. Look, I think there is no doubt that there is still a huge challenge ahead of us. And I think it's really important to recognise that, and we certainly do recognise that there are still many, many businesses and individuals who are struggling. And I guess our message is, particularly around some of those figures, is what we're saying is making sure that the business community in particular recognise that because those things have happened, because we have made some progress and some good progress, this will continue to put more and more constraints on the economy. So it's about, our messages to the business community are, make sure you're aware of the scale and recognise the challenges ahead. Make sure you are forward planning. And how do you do that? Make sure you use the downtime that you've had or are having to actually make sure you've got the right structure for your business, make sure you've got the right staff. If you do need to employ more people, do it now to prepare yourself. So I think the role that we have is continuing to send those messages out to businesses that the business community is never going to be the same again. They do need to recognise and operate with new business models. That requires different skills. They do need to look at different sources for staff, for their supply channels, those sorts of things. They do need to collaborate with other organisations outside the region. So it's about preparing those businesses for those changes. So that's the role that we would take in all of that.
Obviously what's happening with staff in the residential insurance and EQC issues will be linked to how businesses are managing that stress, time off, all those sorts of things as well. Do you see the Chamber taking a more proactive role in asking for changes, perhaps even in legislation or regulation around it, to make sure that people aren't so affecting businesses too?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, it's a key role. In fact, yesterday I facilitated a session on workplace wellness where we had 98 people in the room that came through the weather to get there yesterday morning at 8:15 in the morning. So I think that demonstrates there is a real willingness out there and it's a real issue. So workplace wellness, which ultimately leads to better productivity and better engaged staff and lower turnover and all those sorts of things, is a key issue that businesses are facing. And we do provide a lot of support and resource for businesses to cope with stressed staff and change management and those sorts of things. So whether or not it needs to be legislated is probably a different debate. I think there are many, many organisations in Christchurch who this is part of their HR strategy. It's not an add-on anymore, it's just part of the way that they deal with their staff. We've all lived through so many different disasters in the last few years that, in fact, yesterday I talked to one of our HR people about putting some information out around what their obligations were in terms of staff that couldn't come to work, what they needed to do to support their staff, etc. And he said, I haven't had one call because we've had so many of these things that businesses are now very well prepared and they get on with it. They're resilient. So it is a key role for us to continue providing that support and those messages. Yeah.
Glenn Livingston.
Thank you, Leanne. Just in terms of the both the economic as well as social recovery of the city, obviously it's understood that once the CBD perhaps is more functional, that clearly that's going to deliver that a huge significant part of that economic recovery. But what about the residential sector? So my hunch is that we can get people's homes fixed, and that goes back to insurance settlement too. That's got to be a big economic driver. What's
absolutely.
the Chamber's view on that?
I mean, again, going back to the fact that we're a business-facing organisation, but recognising that you have to have strong business to have a healthy community. You can't have one without the other, in our opinion. So, of course, the commercial rebuild and the central city rebuild has to go in parallel with the residential rebuild, and one should not be at the expense of the other. I mean, that's certainly always been our position and will continue to be.
In terms of an integrated plan, that all makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a key part of that integrated plan as well, is not to have them in isolation.
Yeah, I've never seen it as one or the other, but actually both together, so great to have that. Thank you.
Clearwater?
Thank you for your presentation, and I really like the concept of working collaboratively in the different parts of this. Just sort of alluding to what Glenn was perhaps asking you too, like you referred to huge numbers really of migrant workers coming in on a temporary basis. So in terms of, for example, it's really how could Chamber of Commerce support us to look at how in fact we can plan for their accommodation needs.
Yeah, the accommodation is a very tricky situation, as you will always be very well aware of. And the role that we are playing, first and foremost, is to try and ensure that, the settlement support contract that we've had for a number of years has primarily been around supporting the migrants with their settlement needs. So, information around, the city, how the city works, the hospitals, the schooling, the education, all those sorts of things. The role has changed quite significantly post-earthquake, which is now also providing the same level of support to employers, so employers understand the importance of all of those things with their migrant workers. Part of that whole conversation is around what sort of support the employer can provide to the new migrant, which one component of that is accommodation. So yes, I think we can have some conversations around that. We have a very strong network of employers that are employing migrants here in the city, who we meet with regularly to find out what some of those, and each tranche of migrants that come, we find there are different issues. Obviously, different nationalities have different issues, but as we progress through different stages of the rebuild, the issues change as well. So it's about recognising what those needs are and how we can, as a community, actually work together. And there are many people that work in this space that you'll be aware of, and it's one of the roles that we also have is providing a network facility for all of those providers to get together to make sure we're actually maximising our reach and we're not overlapping each other. So it's a really important part.
I did notice Jimmy Chen. I thought it was you.
Question. You mentioned earlier the settlement support for new migrant employers very successful. But at the moment, based on your 2,800 members, how much percentage for all those new migrants they are adapt and running their business in Canterbury or Christchurch?
So how many of our members would be employing new migrants? So the settlement support contract, we deal with both members and non-members. So it'll be a lot of them will also not be our members that we're working with, but we would actively work with probably around 300 businesses in the city who are actively either currently employing migrants or who are looking at employing migrants or who have some role in providing support to migrants. So it's quite a large number of businesses. There are probably a very small group of of employers who have employed the majority of migrants. So that in itself makes it probably a little bit easier to actually work in a sort of a one-on-one case management type approach with those organisations. But many of those organisations are very, very well advanced in the way that they support their migrants. The next layer down, the smaller companies who are now starting to gear up and look towards, getting more staff through either migrants or other channels, they are the ones that have never employed migrants before and need a lot more support because it's a very complex arrangement to try and also integrate that into the they're Kiwi-born workers as well, so that it's not seen as we do all this for migrants but we don't do anything for our Kiwi workers. So that's the next layer down, which will become more complex.
Thank you.
Tim Scan.
Thank you. I've just got two quick ones. With regards to the insurances, we've got settlements at 45% for homes and about 70% for commercial. In your organisation's opinion, if there were legislation that insisted that insurance companies settle within a time frame, would that, in your organisation's opinion, have accelerated the rebuild? Nice easy one to start with.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I think we would all like to have seen things, progress much faster than what they had have been. But I think we need to understand that for the insurance companies, it wasn't a one-off event that happened and then everything went back to normal and we could assess the damage and move on. We had ongoing earthquakes for, up to 18 months. And so I think that putting a legislation around that may help for some natural disasters, absolutely. Would it have helped for the earthquake? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'm not really in a position to make that call. But, we've certainly been working very, very closely with the insurance companies and, putting as much pressure on them as we can to get some certainty around what's happening, when it's happening, and, and to be fair with the business community and residents.
Okay, thank you. My second one is probably just as interesting. As we're starting with 10% into the rebuild, and we've talked about the insurance settlements, etc. EQC have a time frame which they believe they'll be done and dusted in the city. What's your organisation's feel on that being a realistic time frame?
Look, I think the timeframes that have been put out into the market around all sorts of things have been best guesses. And while it's really helpful to have timeframes, and this is the challenge between having a framework of certainty and having those timeframes out in the public domain. As soon as you put a timeframe in place and it moves, people then criticise you for that. So what tends to happen is people then don't want to put timeframes out, and actually that's not helpful either, because then you've got absolutely no certainty for businesses to make well-informed decisions on. So I think, the time frame for many, many things is probably a little bit unrealistic. When you talk about how long our rebuild will take, we often hear from outside of the region, oh, you told us that, you're going to be in the peak of the rebuild in mid-2013, but it hasn't started yet. Well, why not? And so I think, it's a tricky thing to answer, but I think that the rebuild is going to take a lot longer than what has been predicted, and that's for all those reasons that I mentioned before around supply constraints, people constraints, insurance complexities. We've got all these people now who've had money paid out to them from their homes that now want to actually start rebuilding, but they're not just going to fix things, they're actually going to do a whole lot of betterment as well. Yeah. So what they might have estimated that it might take 3 months to do that repair, well, it's actually going to take 6, because they're going to add a deck or do whatever to their property at the same time. So all those things keep being, pushing timeframes out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd just like to follow on what Ali said. Your organisation was fantastic in what you did following the earthquake. I know there are a number of people that I know that it really saved them from going under or thinking differently. So just say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vicky Buck.
Thank you. Just in relation to...
Oh, sorry, I left out Pauline. I'll come back to you. Sorry, Vicky.
Just in relation to the temporary work visas, you suggested that 10,000, is that just for 1 year?
Generally 2 years.
Okay, so 10,000 over 2 years. And are those temporary work visas, are they just attached to one person, or does one person come with a family sometimes?
So initially one person comes, and I'm not an expert in this area, so I probably need to be a wee bit careful about the detail. But so when I say 10,000, so it's 10,000, and they generally are on 2-year terms.
Right.
So it's 10,000 for 1 year, but they're here for 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
What tends to happen is they come as individuals, and not in all situations, but I'm generalising here, they come as individuals. What we're finding now is many of them who are here are quite keen to stay.
Yes.
So they then need to go through that process to extend their their permits and things.
And in terms of accommodation, are they looking initially for rental accommodation?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, and I mean many of them through some of the larger PMOs, which you'll be aware of, have accommodation arranged for them in different facilities. But those particularly that are coming out for it and wanting to bring families and things will probably move out of that into rental accommodation.
Right, Pauline.
Thank you. And just leading on from that, I was just, Leanne, wondering, are you aware of any businesses that might be interested in actually providing accommodation for migrant workers?
There are several businesses who currently do provide accommodation for their migrant workers. And I mean, out of any disaster, there's always opportunities that come up, and there are businesses who have set themselves up to provide support in all sorts of different areas, including this. I mean, we're seeing lots of sort of homestay type environments where all of a sudden they'll have 2 bedrooms that they will lease out to migrant workers and things like that. So we're not aware of, well, I'm not aware personally of any large scale organisations that are providing direct accommodation, but certainly there are some construction companies who have provided their own accommodation.
Good. But anyway, my question is to congratulate you as well on the Recover Canterbury program. If I could be site specific, particularly what you ran in Edgware in St Albans, and that area had been struggling for years to get a business association together, and as a result of your work that's been commenced and it's quite successful. And you also ran a Edgware is open for business, and you might have done it around the city, and that was incredibly successful and really, really uplifting for the businesses and the community. But my question is that severed, or do you still have a relationship? How proactive are you, if you do, in keeping these things going and in communicating with them and supporting them as an ongoing type thing?
Yeah, one of the things that came out of Recover Canterbury was what were some of the legacy things that we would like to see carry on beyond, obviously, the life of Recover Canterbury. And a lot of the things that were established with that in mind. And the measure of success is always when you walk away and those things continue. And some of those things, as you mentioned, have continued, which is great. So the Chamber does continue to play a role in supporting those sorts of avenues. One of the challenges that we have is because we are membership funded primarily. So if we spend a lot of time supporting non-members, that's to the detriment often to those that actually pay an annual subscription for that support. So there's a balance between how much we can provide support to those areas, and often it's at an information level or like a coordination, a facilitation type role, rather than us being a key part of that association, for example. So yes, we do continue to provide support for many different organisations like that, but probably at arm's length.
Yanni Johansson.
Thank you. Just 2 questions. One is, how much are you doing around the issue, the idea of sustainability and resilience going forward? It just seems like there's, possibly an area where we could do better as a city in terms of either new buildings in the commercial sector or just the ongoing practices. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts around what you're doing in regards to sustainability and whether we might be able to work with you through the program that we do, Target Sustainability, to get more opportunities delivered on.
It's an interesting question, actually, because we had, before the earthquake, sustainability was quite a key focus, one of our sort of tranches of work that we were actively involved in. And just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with ECA around pretty much them asking the same question, is it on your radar? Is it on your members' radar? And be fair to say that up until very recently it hasn't been a key priority, not because it's not important, but it just hasn't been a priority in terms of the other priorities that we have. And I think with our own rebuild in Kilmore Street, it was one of the key elements of when we set down some objectives of what we wanted to achieve. One of it was we wanted to have a sustainable building, and we wanted to be seen as a leader in that area, so that our members would obviously see that and go, it's good for them, then maybe we should follow. So the answer is we haven't done a whole lot just yet. We certainly support sustainable building and making sure that businesses have that as a key component of their rebuild. However, really, really important, and this is the message that I had for ICA, that it's simple and it's not done at a cost. So it's not seen as an added cost. So we have our building and then we have sustainability that's added on top of it. It has to be really, really simple, and often, in our experience, it can be quite complex, particularly around some of the consenting issues and some of the processes that you have to go through.
I mean, do you have a relationship with our Target Sustainability Program within Council?
We have in the past, but yeah, probably not. We probably need to renew that.
I think that would be really good if, obviously an opportunity.
Yep.
The second question was what you're seeing in regards to the central city versus the development that's happening in the Addington and the suburbs, and particularly around the airport. Are you seeing a desire from your members to come back into the central city? Do you see any constraints around what's stopping people from coming back? And do you have any thoughts as to, what we might be able to do as a city to encourage people to come back?
We get asked that question a lot, and I mean, I think that the suburbs will always be different now to what they were, as will the central city. And I think there will be businesses that will return to the central city, there's no doubt about that, but it will be substantially different to what it was previously. I think the longer we take to rebuild the central city, the chances of some businesses remaining in the suburbs that may have come back, there's a real risk to us with that. Some of the key challenges that we hear about businesses who are wanting to move back into the central city or have visions to move back into the central city is just the uncertainty. And that's, hence the reason you hear us talking a lot about give us a framework of certainty, give us some priorities, give us some timelines on some of those anchor projects. And I think we're starting to get that now, which is great. And I think, some of the larger corporates will come back into the central city. The retail offering in the central city will be substantially different, but then I think it should be. And we had problems pre-earthquake, so we've got an opportunity to fix that, as you know, Paul. So we've got a great opportunity to fix it, but it will be different, and businesses need to think differently about that as well. So instead of them coming back in and taking the same, foot space that they had pre-earthquake, they'll come back and it will be different, and they may come in and they may share space with another organisation, or they may have a smaller space. So, the message that we're talking to people about is think about all these things, but don't think you're coming back to what it used to be, and so they need to think differently about that. I think there is still a huge opportunity for businesses to move back into the central city, and I think we'll see that, but it will just be very, very different to what it was.
Just any concerns around the cost of people moving back into the central city when there's so much cheap, affordable office space elsewhere?
Absolutely. I mean, that's, one of the, I mentioned earlier that we've just done a survey with our members, and that was one of the key things that came up is, the cost of what it may be to move back into the central city. But that's a reality. And so businesses need to make those decisions based on, well-informed information. And yeah, that will be a challenge for a lot of businesses.
Raf Manji.
Yeah, hi Leanne. You're asking us there to help you and saying how can we help? Well, I would put that back to you and say how can we help? So if you look at the top four, I mean, what exactly could we be doing to help with those?
Well, we've talked about, I'll start with the fourth one, we've talked about the certainty and that integrated plan. I think that's really important, and if you can, provide some leadership in that area, I think that would be really, really helpful. Being overtly business-friendly and supportive of business, that's something that's nothing new. We've always played that role, and we've been referred to as a...
How can we play that role, I guess is the question.
Well, I think it's about making it really easy for people. So, fast-tracking things wherever possible, making sure that for things like consent, it's very well understood what the processes are, putting timeframes on those sorts of things. And, you're certainly doing some of that now. So again, nothing too new, but just continuing to have that focus, making sure that everything that you do when you engage with businesses is made really clear, well thought through in terms of how would a business engage with a council, and what sort of impact would that have.
Yep.
So, you know, there might be some specific areas around some building consents and things like that that we will seek some feedback from our members on. In fact, we had some comments from the businesses late last year, which I know we've fed through to some of the staff here at the council. So it's having those open door conversations as well, and having the right people within the council for our members to talk to. And I guess the first one, the minimising the financial impositions, is making sure that that's just fair and equitable amongst all of the businesses, and making sure that it's not heavily weighed on the business versus residents, and it's just a balance there. So, yep.
And is there anybody in council that you have a direct contact with around business issues?
Well, I know obviously Peter spends quite a lot of time talking to the Mayor, and also probably to acting CEO. So no, look, I think we have a really good relationship with the council, and I think that's really useful for us to continue to have those conversations, so that if we are finding issues within the business community, that we've got the right channels to bring them to the council, and try and find some solutions around them.
And what about CDC? I mean, 'cause it seems to me, you're actually in a very similar space to where they might be. How does that relationship work?
We work really closely with the CDC. We have, a couple of joint venture type of organisations that we've set up with the Canterbury Development Corporation. So, I mean, obviously their focus being on economic development, our focus being on directly building business capability and support. And I think as long as we both stay in our own respective areas, and where we can work together, we do, and we do that really, really well. So, yeah, I mean, I think it works really well. One of the things that I've, huge amount of respect for the work that they're doing, CDC are doing on the economic development strategy, and making sure, the underlying, sectors of our economy are still being well supported, so that all the focus is not just going on the rebuild. And so we often will play a key role in actually making sure that our business community are engaged in the work that the CDC are doing. So we work very closely with them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and it was great that you could come. I hope that your last point, recognising the Chamber as a trusted partner, I hope that, inviting you to present an open session to the Committee of the Whole Council is an indication of that absolute commitment to partner with the Chamber and our other strategic allies, as it were, in the city, to make sure that we do work on those common objectives in the interest to optimise Christchurch's future. So great. This is a first, I think, for the council, and so I hope that represents to you the promise of things to come.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for taking so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is a resolution to accept the